The consideration. The consideration of the contract is not the option fee, guys. It is not the option fee. Because what does it say if you put the option fee in there and never pay it? That you don't have an option, is what it says, okay? So if you say you're going to pay it and you don't, it's very loud and clear that you don't have an option fee. If you say you're not going to pay anything, then you don't have an option, okay? So buyer's failure to pay an option doesn't mean they're in default of the contract. It just means they don't have the right to terminate it for any reason. The most recent problems we've had is we've had buyers who've written contracts, done inspections the next day. When is the option fee due? 3 days. So nobody requires it ahead of time, does the inspection the next day, and then sends a notice of termination. So I was going, well, they haven't even paid the option fee yet. Don't they have to pay the option fee before they can terminate it? Yes. Okay, so then they wait 3 days and the buyer never sends the option fee. So now they don't have the right to terminate and now they're in default. It's not the same thing. They're not necessarily in default of the contract. They just don't have the option to terminate. And just because I gave you a notice of termination under improperly does not mean I'm in default of the contract. So what I tell the sellers, you just don't automatically get their earnest money just because they terminated improperly during an option period. You have to proceed along the contract and force them into default because they're not in default yet. That means you have to proceed on, and then if the buyer doesn't apply for their loan or doesn't give you notice that they weren't able to give the loan or didn't give you notice of objections, then you're in default. But you pretty much have to go all the way up to closing for most of that to pass, and the buyer would be in default. But they're not in default just because they tried to terminate when they didn't have the right to terminate. Does that make sense?